that he should be prepared for to implement kind of day one, and then even in the first 100 days, that could really show the American people that he's doing as much as he can for the economy to try to combat this whole leftist narrative that's going to try to pin a recession on him?
Well, I expect a very robust first 100 days like we saw last time. Trump came in firing away with executive orders and things like that. I think in terms of the short term, I think the rotation of professional staff is going to be very, very important for demonstrating the ability to translate political promises into political action. And plus, I think with that will come new ideas. I think that will show a vibrancy and that we can expect from the executive from the executive branch in that sort of situation. So you're seeing follow through on personnel choices there, not simply the cabinet positions, but further down. What exactly does some of these proposals about Elon Musk and government efficiency and trying to address the spending side of it through looking over the way that's always been done and certain things. I think those are some areas of getting cuts on the margins. Of course, once you start getting into more systemic changes on the spending side, that's going to require legislative action. It's going to require a little bit more controversy. The good thing is that, the first time around, Donald Trump had two very big obstacles as part of the legislative process. He had Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House, who was never a believer of Trump's agenda, who was an obstacle as the head of the Republican coalition in the House of Representatives, and you had John McCain, which helped stop Obamacare reform and things like that. He will not have those burdens. He'll have a little more wiggle room on the Senate side of things if the trends continue there. And so, hopefully, essentially, there's going to be some elements that executive policy will help. I think the regulatory side, we definitely expect some improvements there. I think that there's going to be some improvements when it comes to energy policy in particular. That has a bigger impact. But ultimately, there's going to need to be follow-through on the legislative side as well to really hit at it, because, again, the number one issue is going to be that spending problem, because there's a lot less wiggle room that any politician would have dealing with the debt saturation that we've got right now. So, again, that's going to require both short-term executive actions. I think will set the pace for what we can expect for the next 4 years, but having that follow through with the legislative action will be something truly cement a legacy that can go beyond simply executive order.
Yeah, and I'm speaking with Tho Bishop, who's a content director for the Mises Institute, and this is really important in terms of a lasting legacy and lasting priorities to not just have executive action, because of course remember that Biden on day one, had something like 36 executive actions that reversed a lot of, or at least what he could, of the Trump administration's policies. And so if you just have executive action to executive action, then that's, of course, dependent on just the whim of whoever is in the executive branch. And so you want these legislative victories. And also to your point, though, that Speaker Paul Ryan between 2016 and 2018 really was at odds with Donald Trump, did not want to work with him. We saw how that panned out, and I think that that conservatives in general, and at least those priorities and the legislative priorities, are set up a lot better in 2024 because you have Mike Johnson, who presumably will continue as the Speaker of the House, who is very much a Trump supporter. They work well together. They worked well even when he was just a member, and so that relationship, I think, is going to be very different. But we still have the GOP leader in the Senate. That election that is forthcoming, I think it's on November 18th, and that could cut a couple of different ways. And if there is somebody like perhaps a Senator Mike Lee, or someone who is willing to work with Speaker Johnson and President Trump in terms of those priorities, then you genuinely do have a trifecta, at least, of trying to whip the votes, get everybody on board. You still have some of the problems with the factions and the coalitions among the GOP majority, but it's a lot easier when your leader is saying, hey, get on board, instead of the leader being at odds with the administration. So how important are those dynamics in terms of some of the specifically economic priorities that conservatives would like to see?
Well, it's going to be very important. Of course, just as important is going to be the margin there, because there are some. You have your Lisa Murkowski's, right? You have your Senator Collins and the like. So that can not always be in lockstep with the rest of the Republican caucus there. So that's why it looks like there might be a path in Arizona, as slim as it might be there, but the margins for that Senate will also be very, very important, as well as the leadership race there. It's going to be very interesting to see how that one plays out. John Thune was very close to Mitch McConnell, different personality. I don't think he's going to be stabbing Republicans a week before election time. So that would be a small improvement in many ways. John Cornyn, someone who I think has a lot of backlash in his own home state of Texas. I think that'd be a very discouraging sign if the Senate went that direction. You will see some of the other options out there that might present itself. I know Rick Scott has talked about running, but I don't think he has a lot of political capital with his colleagues to achieve that position there. But the Senate's always been, in part by design, the Senate is not supposed to be as reactive to political wins as the House. But there has been, I think, a very big disconnect between the leadership of Republican leadership in the Senate and where the Republican base is. I think that the Republican base is far more along the lines of Mike Lee, of Rand Paul, of when J.D. Vance was in the Senate, obviously. And I think there's always been a big ideological gap between that group of Republican senators and the leadership of the Republican senators. And so hopefully, even if it is, say, a John Thune, hopefully, particularly given the performance that Trump's agenda had this election cycle, even if it's an older personality, if it is a more traditional senator that is leading the Republican caucus up there, hopefully they will recognize exactly where the base is and is willing to be more differential to the directions that the Trump administration wants to go and to actually get stuff done rather than being an obstacle to that in the Senate.
Yeah, I think that's spot on analysis. And so, let's talk also about the Fourth Estate and legacy media, which of course is going to be generally against Trump. I mean, we've already seen the hysteria this week from, The View has been very entertaining, and a few of these people who are just like, I can't believe this, and America is, it's a dark day in America, and I'm thinking, have you not gone to the grocery store recently? Like, what? But again, this is just the dramatic worldview difference between the left and the right, and these social issues versus just plain traditional rights of Americans and American values in terms of the economy and actually having a sovereign nation, things like that. So in terms of how the media might shape this, how important is this going to be for Trump to be, as he was in his campaign? I mean, in the general election over the last several months, and I've said it here on this program, he has been a lot more disciplined than he was in 2020. I think, and even than he was in the primary, especially. So how important is it going to be for him to remain disciplined and combat that sort of anti-conservative narrative from the legacy media? And I think, with Elon Musk's help, of course, because a lot of people are going to non-traditional sources, like radio, for example, but also on social media, podcasts, and that kind of thing.
I think the legacy, the reputation of the legacy media has been rightfully destroyed. They have proven themselves, I think, irrelevant in terms of shaping opinion. First of all, for a large percentage of the country, based off of the election results that we saw this week. So, what I'm interested in is twofold. One is, what are the differences that can be acted upon so that just to the same extent to which it was people looking at the receipts after going to the grocery store that shaped the way that they saw the economy, rather than all the propaganda we got about, this is actually a great recovery. If you look at this chart, and you look at this data point, then actually things are looking great, and Americans just need to appreciate how great we have it, right? It's going to be, what are the changes that Americans can see first and foremost with their own eyes? The second part, though, is I'm very interested to see how the administration, as a broader communication strategy, continues what made the campaign so successful going into Tuesday, which is a very active, very targeted alternative media strategy. Are we going to continue to see, say, J.D. Vance going on podcasts as the vice president talking about the agenda? Are we going to see them not just simply focus on the traditional Washington press poll, but doing a lot more, almost kind of FDR-style fireside chats? Whether or not it's Trump himself, right? The president's schedule is very different than the candidate's schedule. But how active, how targeted is the administration going to be to try to bypass that traditional legacy media, going directly to the voters that put Trump in office this time around? And it's going to be, if they do that, it's going to be a change in the way that the White House operates. I think that could be a very positive thing for politics in general. But I'm very interested to see that aspect of it because, again, as we saw, again, the legacy of the mainstream media, and to a certain extent, the smart ones, I think, are recognizing just how the damage that has happened by their own behavior. But it's not going to fix anytime soon. It's going to be continually hostile, no matter what happens the next 4 years. So how they supplement that with a new strategy, I think, will be very interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this as well is going to depend on the people that Trump chooses to put around him and in some of these key positions. And of course, it's going to depend on, the leadership in the House and also, of course, in the Senate. And so this is what we need to be praying for everyone who's listening. Our influence and our participation and our engagement, doesn't end on Election Day. Certainly, we need to make our voice heard. You can always contact your members, tell them, the priorities that you want to see, but we also need to be praying that good people, good Christians and good competent people would populate the Trump administration. We need to pray for our leaders, and also that the coalitions of these majorities, of these new majorities, would really have the best possible priorities and a biblical worldview and outlook in terms of how they're shaping a government for America for at least the next 2 years in the short term. So, Tho Bishop, thanks so much, and we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
Abraham, there's a crisis around the world. In many parts of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, only 1 in 10 Christians has a Bible. What's that mean? It means the majority of believers cannot do what you and I do on a daily basis, and that's open God's Word and be reminded of His precious promises. Like in 1 Peter 5:7, cast your cares on Him, for He cares for you. Hey, here's the reaction of a senior saint in South Africa who finally received her Bible.
She literally knelt down, cried. At the age of 60, she never had a Bible. It is so much fulfilling just to see people rejoicing when they receive their Bible.
By the end of November, we want to put tears of joy on the faces of 4,000 Bible-less believers in this season of Thanksgiving. Would you pray about it and get involved today, Abraham?
$5 sends a Bible. $100 sends 20. $500 sends 100. Give by calling 800-YES-WORD. 800-YES-WORD. Or visit sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
So right now may be the perfect time for you to rethink how you pay for health care. And here's why. This time of year is decision time for a lot of people, but it's also when you can join MediShare and save even more than usual. For many families, joining MediShare means saving about $500 a month, which is a game changer for a lot of people, obviously. But what's more, MediShare members like it a lot. Their satisfaction rate is 98%. Imagine that. And MediShare is a proven thing, too, for over 30 years. It's a Christian community of hundreds of thousands of people now. And here's the thing. If you join before November 15th and you mention the promo code SHARE, they'll waive your application fee, so you save even more right off the bat. I'll give you the number here in a second, but just call and you'll get a price within 2 minutes. And again, the deadline is November 15th. So call now. You'll save even more. Here's the number. 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starn. Stand by for news and commentary next. Vice President Kamala Harris is at the center of a jaw-dropping scandal in Washington. Her campaign raised more than $1 billion, but on Election Day, she was reportedly $20 million in debt. Veteran politicos are stunned, many wondering how a campaign can blow through that much cash. Politico reports the campaign spent most of the money courting high-profile celebrities like Lizzo, Katy Perry, and Eminem. What? You thought the Hollywood crowd was really showing up pro bono for Kamala? Those concerts drained millions of dollars from the campaign budget, not to mention a massive digital strategy. Many campaign staffers are still waiting for overdue paychecks. And even before Election Day, staffers were being laid off. And now the campaign is struggling to raise money to cover the deficit. Well, maybe Kamala could get a job at McDonald's. Too soon? Be sure to get a copy of my new book. It's called Twilight's Last Gleaming, Can America Be Saved? It's available at toddsterns.com.
Speaking truth with love. This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Welcome back, and we are talking about the all-important policy priorities of the forthcoming Trump administration and what is turning out to be a trifecta of Republican control of the forthcoming Congress, the Senate, and also the White House. And remember, they had that trifecta back in 2016, but there were a lot of personality conflicts and not so much focus on actually doing work for the American people. But it hopefully will be a little different this time. I think that Trump has certainly learned from his first 4 years, and there are also different players in place. And so Speaker Mike Johnson is far more likely to work with a Trump administration priorities than a former Speaker Paul Ryan. And we're still waiting to see what the election of the GOP leader and the majority leader in the U.S. Senate will be, and that's going to determine a lot in terms of those priorities as well. But let's welcome in Walker Wildman, who is, of course, the vice president here at the American Family Association and leads AFA Action. Because for Christians, we need to, of course, engage in policy that is consistent with a biblical worldview. And conservatism and conservative priorities, of course, is derived from our biblical worldview of government and how we engage as citizens in our government and how we can participate in helping the new Congress and Senate and the Trump administration shape those priorities. So, and of course, work still goes on in the states as well. But since we're all talking about the federal level, we'll focus there today. But good morning, Walker, and great to talk with you.
Hey, Jenna, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is really important for conservatives to engage, and I think we'll have a greater opportunity, certainly, as Christians and conservative, policy organizations to engage, I think, a lot more with the Trump administration than we did the Biden-Harris administration for obvious reasons. So what in your mind are the policies that at least in the first 100 days, and even in the presidential transition period, but the first 100 days that Christians and specifically AFA Action wants to focus on?
Well, there's a few that come to mind. The first one is the life issue. The FDA under Biden signed off on and fought for mifepristone, which is the abortion pill, in federal court and ended up winning to a degree at the Supreme Court. So I think we need to reopen that discussion of the FDA signing off on what we know is a very dangerous drug and deadly in some cases drug for women. So that needs to be priority number one at the agency level at the FDA, and we need to make it very difficult for that to ever be resurrected. Also, we need to, the Trump administration is going to have to do everything that it can through the Department of Health and Human Services, the DOJ, and other agencies to protect minors that are being mutilated by so-called doctors and hospital systems. These are transgender surgeries that are taking place all around the country where 13, 15-year-olds are having their body parts removed and they're becoming sterilized, unable to have children for the rest of their life because of gender dysphoria. So we have so-called medical professionals that are facilitating and participating in these very dangerous, life-changing procedures on minors. So we've got to go after that. All the pro-lifers need to be pardoned. Every pro-lifer that was locked up by Joe Biden needs a full pardoning or sentencing commutation. and also the J6ers, they all need to be let out. But I want, beyond just some of this unraveling of Biden's disastrous 4 years, we need more lasting reform. We need basically a deconstructing of the bureaucratic agencies that are in Washington, D.C., whether we're talking IRS, FCC, FDA, DOJ. All these agencies need to be deconstructed to such a degree that it basically makes it very difficult for a future Democrat president to rebuild the agencies. I mean, we've really got to strip them down from a lot of their power and their overreach that they've developed over the last 50 to 70 years.
Yes, absolutely. I could not agree more. And, this isn't just about having 4 years for executive orders and to reverse some of the executive orders of Biden, because then if, another president comes in from either party that, wants to do damage, then we're just kind of at the mercy of whoever happens to be in power. There needs to be some lasting change, and that needs to come mainly through legislative priorities and, of course, dismantling and defunding the big bureaucratic state. And Trump in his first term had talked about and promised defunding and dismantling things like the Department of Education and a lot of the bloat in Washington and some of the deep state. When he talks about draining the swamp, I mean, these are the bureaucrats in Washington that basically have just full tenure. They're not term limited. This is just their lifetime job, and it's very difficult to get rid of them. With Elon Musk, which I think is such an interesting X factor, I mean, no pun intended, but just an interesting thing for him to come in and want to be part of this new kind of Department of Governmental Efficiency. That to me is a really exciting innovation to say, yeah, we don't need to be funding all of these positions. We can save a lot of money and maybe even just in that pay down some of the national debt, reduce taxes, have all of these other ancillary benefits. How do you see, these people like Elon Musk in that particular department helping shape some of the policies that really could effectively do some of the draining of the swamp?
Yeah, having people that are actually business leaders and people who actually know how to run an organization and run a company in the private sector, having them in the administration is going to be critical. So whether it's Elon Musk or anyone else, this really winnowing down of what is the federal government is very, very important, and we've got to be aggressive. And I think Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and some of the others that they are speaking aggressively in this topic, but it's not enough just to pause hiring or slightly reduce hiring. We're talking about thousands of people that need to be let go. And I think Elon Musk actually said the other day, look, we can give them severances. We're not going to put them out on the streets, but we're also not going to commit to continue hiring them. So the reducing of the headcount at the federal level has to be drastic. I mean, it has to be. I've said recently, we really need to kind of be uncomfortable with it. Like, it needs to be like, do we really need to lay off 50,000 people today? It needs to be aggressive, slightly uncomfortable, unorthodox, radical, whatever you want to call it. There's about a 2-year window of opportunity to get things done. If the Republicans are able to get the House in the next few days, they'll have both chambers. So the window of opportunity is about a 2-year window where President Trump will control both chambers, and he won't be threatened with impeachments and investigations. So that's really his window to get a lot of this work done.
Yeah, and if we have learned anything from the first Trump term, it's how much the left is not just going to go away and allow a lot of these conservative priorities to just actually have work done without some of these ways to try to distract and to thwart the genuine progress that conservatives can make, because often Walker, and I'm speaking of course with Walker Wildman, who's the vice president here at the American Family Association, often when we talk about conservatism, one of the complaints that some of the more populist people on the right say about conservatism is that we're far too defensive. And so when we just play defense, then we lose ground and we have to go on offense. And I think in some ways they're right about that, but we do have to go on offense in the right ways. We, of course, like the rules and the structure as we should, because no one should have power over the limited power that ultimately our highest law of the land provides, and the separation of powers. That's what provides for the confidence that we won't ultimately end up in tyranny. And so when we work within that structure, we still need to advance the ball for conservative priorities. And there is a great opportunity to do that. So how do you see the conservatives, I guess, learn from the lessons of 2016 and maybe be a little bit more prepared to not get distracted by the inevitable nonsense that the left is likely going to throw at conservatives, and particularly Donald Trump in his second term?
Yeah. Well, look, the criticisms of some are the criticisms by some non-traditional conservatives against conservatives in the evangelical community. I mean, some of those criticisms, hold some weight. The problem that sometimes our movement, our side, deals with, to your point, is really not raising the bar and expecting more of our leaders and leaders in the conservative movement, specifically at this point, the Republican Party. So we're going to have to. I don't want to talk about boring stuff like tax reform. Like if all we're going to talk about is how we need to renew Trump's tax cuts, that's boring and that's not revolutionary. And so this election was really a mandate for revolutionary change in D.C. and Lindsey Graham's tweeting about tax cuts and reconciliation with the budget after President Trump won the election. We need to be tweeting about how many federal employees we're going to fire and how many DOJ employees we're going to fire instead of, and how we're going to right the wrong of how the Biden administration forced these experimental shots on our military members and then dishonorably discharged them after they wouldn't take these experimental shots. So there's just so much that has to be done, but we can't lower the bar. We can't expect less and talk about the same old talking points and the same old things that we've been talking about the last 10 years, like repeal and replace Obamacare. That is so that's like a 2012 talking point of Mitt Romney. We don't need to be talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare. There's so much more bigger things that have to be done. To your point, we just have to think outside the box, and we have to be unorthodox in our approach of the drastic changes that have to take place in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and drastic, I think, is the mandate, because for Trump to even win the popular vote, I mean, that is huge, and that is just a complete repudiation of the leftist vision for America. And I almost think of this as I've been, kind of thinking this week, since Tuesday and kind of, letting the dust settle a little bit and saying, okay, here we are again. It almost seems like we've done a complete reset. We've turned off America and we're turning her back on again. Complete reset to say, okay, we are rejecting what the left wanted to implement with their radical agenda for this so-called gender-affirming care of kids, for their education priorities, for all of the things that they want to do on the social issues, taking away parental rights, taking away freedom and liberty, transforming natural rights into so-called civil rights, which are really just privileges. And I actually love what our mutual friend, our good friend Steve Deace, posted yesterday. He said this, Walker, to our leftist countrymen anticipating the coming reign of Trumpian terror, I can offer you no words of comfort otherwise. Prepare yourselves for the looming reckoning. For your insolence, we will cut your taxes. For your disobedience, we will secure your borders. For your coercive tyranny, we will make you healthier. For your treachery, police will be dispatched to round up the violent criminals in your blue cities and imprison them. You have been warned. Your time is coming. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're going to make America better and stronger, whether you want to come along with us or not. Another thing I wanted to comment on that's relevant over the next 5, 6, 7 days is this election for GOP Senate leader. I was watching John Thune, which is basically a McConnell 2.0, on Fox yesterday, and they were asking him about his run for the Senate leadership position. He's trying to replace McConnell. He and John Cornyn are. They're both running along with Rick Scott out of Florida. And John Thune was repeating the same old traditional Bush-era talking points of expanding our military, improving the economy. I mean, it was the same old talking points, but he said nothing about going after the DOJ, going after these out-of-control agencies, nothing about cutting spending. It was all the same old, status quo talking points of the Republican Party, and that's just not going to cut it. I mean, there's no way it's going to actually hinder a Trump presidency if President Trump endorses John Thune or Cornyn for this Senate GOP leader. We need fresh blood in that position, because that's the McConnell and Trump obviously have not got along very well. But McConnell worked against Trump at every turn when he was, with the exception of the federal judges. McConnell worked against Trump at every turn. So I'm just going to be on the lookout to see who President Trump picks to be that Senate GOP leader, because we need new leadership, and we don't need a McConnell 2.0 in that position.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and I hope that Trump is involved more than he has at least projected that he might be, because it is going to be very important to have someone who will work with the conservative priorities in the agenda, because you genuinely need a coalition and not kind of all of this infighting and different views on priorities and all of that. If he, especially with the Senate, if he wants to get his political appointees pushed through in in fairly short order, he's going to need the Senate, and especially for the federal judiciary, which coming up, Walker, as well is I think a really key issue. And I know that the Center for Judicial Integrity has been doing a lot of work on this. Phil Jareggi has done excellent work for AFA, and now that we have a Trump administration and some of the ability to inform that the administration on judicial selections. It's interesting. I don't think the Democrats are going to be wanting to pack the court now. Surprisingly, I wonder why. But it is possible that there will be Supreme Court vacancies over the next 4 years. So what is AFA doing in terms of our participation in the judicial selections, and not just the Supreme Court? I mean, the entire federal bench matters.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we love and we appreciate and we need Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. And the reality is, though, that they're likely to retire under a Trump administration. That's really no surprise. That's not breaking news. Both of them are at the point where they've served multiple decades on the Supreme Court, and they're looking for an opportunity to retire and be replaced by a Republican nominee. So we're going to have to keep on the lookout for that. And what I want to warn against is appointing any replacement to a Thomas or to a Alito that is less than, that is not as good as Thomas and Alito. And I understand the bar is really, really high because they're so very good on their rulings and their constitutionality. But we have to keep the bar high and the expectations high. We just can't settle for somebody who's just kind of good, like a Gorsuch or a Kavanaugh. We really have to settle for someone who's the best of the best of the best at the Supreme Court when you're talking about replacing those two. So there just has to be a lot of diligence and a lot of really keeping the bar high when it comes to replacing those two. But there's going to be hundreds of lower court, whether it's district or circuit court positions, that are going to have to be filled. There's actually going to be some vacancies on day one that Biden wasn't able to fill in these courts around the country. So the remaking of the federal judiciary to be more constitutional and more conservative could be another legacy builder for President Trump, but his team's going to really have to be on their A game to make sure we get the best of the best in all of these positions.
Yeah, that is so well said, and we, especially if it's replacing an Alito or a Thomas, but even if it's Sotomayor that or Kagan that ends up leaving, we want the best of the best, and we don't want justices who are going to compromise on some of the things that unfortunately we have seen from Trump's previous nominees, and so the vetting process needs to happen. We need to start doing it now so that it's not kind of a scramble when some of those vacancies occur, and that's why the AFA Action has done so much work in terms of the green list already, and so you can go to AFA Action online. You can see all of those things and start thinking about that. Start praying now that good decisions would be made, and that the future of the judiciary, the future of legislation, all of these priorities and policy determinations, personnel, all of this would be centered and focused on what is genuinely best and biblical and right and moral and upright for America. So Walker, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much for dropping by, and we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Let's think about what God has done. I would wager that his top news story is still that the free salvation through the blood of Jesus Christ is available to all. I wager that will be the top news story until that salvation is no longer available. You will have made your decision for eternity. He doesn't ask us to do anything he won't, and then he does above what we can possibly do.
Hear Todd Herman on A Disciple's View, weekdays 12 p.m. Central on AFR.
We don't have to be like the 10 that said it can't be done, it's too big, the Giants are too big. We need to be like Joshua and Caleb and say, you know what, there are giants. This is a massive problem. When you have a nation that is ignorant of the principles that produce a free society, start where you can. It's the only way I know. It's a little bit at a time.
Join Walker Wildman and Rick Green as they tackle today's issues from a biblical and a constitutional perspective. At the Core, 1 p.m. Central weekdays on AFR.
As the world changes in an era of crisis, families throughout America are experiencing instability, fear, and great loss. While many are searching for answers in places of desperation, the position and mission of the church has never been more clear. It's time for us to leave the buildings and saturate the streets with redemptive hope and the love of Jesus. Saturate USA is a movement of churches and believers across America, uniting as one to reach every home with the love of the gospel. At SaturateUSA.org, you and your church can join the movement by adopting a zip code and receiving free neighborhood maps and evangelistic materials, including Jesus Film DVDs with free online streaming. Simply mobilize your volunteers, assemble your saturation packs with free materials and your own church's information, and then send out teams to distribute to homes. Let's partner together and see every zip code in America adopted for Christ. Join the movement at SaturateUSA.org.
Wherever the gospel goes, lives are changed. Lives like Sonia's. When Sonia came to a Tomorrow Club, she had little reason to hope for a better future.
As Armenian refugees living in a remote community in the Republic of Georgia, life was desperately hard for Sonia and her family. The recent death of her baby brother had made things even worse, and her mother had fallen into a deep depression. At the club, Sonia heard the gospel and her faith began to grow as she attended weekly club meetings. Soon, a small church grew out of the Tomorrow Club, and Sonia prayed her mother would come to the church. Sonia's prayers were answered. Her mother came, surrendered her life to Christ, recovered from her depression, was baptized, and now leads the Tomorrow Club where her daughter found Christ.
Partnering with local churches, Tomorrow Clubs help kids and teens in forsaken places learn to follow Jesus through long-term discipleship. To learn more about how Tomorrow Clubs are reaching young hearts and minds for Christ, visit tomorrowclubs.org. That's tomorrowclubs.org. All gifts are tax deductible. Speaking truth with love. This is Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Welcome back. And, even though this has felt like election season for the last, 2 years practically, and certainly the last several months, we are going in to the Christmas season, which is just the most magical, wonderful time of the year. And this is, of course, our opportunity as an AFA family to participate in the Operation Christmas Child. So now through November 25th, you can send the good news of Jesus Christ to children around the world through a simple shoebox gift. And every shoebox is an opportunity to share the truth about Christ and God's love. So this is a direct way for you to equip the local church around the world and Operation Christmas Child's local ministry partners with a simple shoebox gift to reach their own communities and establish long-term relationships. So if you want to pack your shoebox now, it's any standard size shoebox. Drop it off during the third week of November. This year, that is November 18th through 25th. Shoeboxes will be collected across the country at more than 4,700 drop-off locations. My church here in Florida is participating as well. So visit SamaritansPurse.org/OCC to learn more the best items to pack and to find a drop-off location near you. So that's SamaritansPurse.org/OCC for Operation Christmas Child. And another way that you can participate, beyond the election and make a lasting impact for policy, for truth, for spreading the truth of the gospel of Christ is participating in the AFA Foundation. And so Chelsea Wildman is here to tell us a little bit more about how you can engage in that. So good morning, Chelsea.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Jenna.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for maybe new listeners or people who, have heard a little bit about the AFA Foundation, but they're, not really sure exactly what it is that you do and how they can participate, tell us a little more.
Yes, so our AFA Foundation, we exist to help donors provide an income for life through our charitable gift annuity that we offer. A charitable gift annuity is simply a gift from you to AFA, and in exchange you would receive a fixed income for life. That income percentage is based on how old you are at the time that you give the gift, as well as when you start to receive that. So you get a lifetime income, a partial tax deduction the year that you give the gift, as well as partial tax-free income when you start to receive those payments. And then upon your passing, any remaining funds are then given to AFA to continue our ministry and to be able to support us, for years to come. So it's really a win-win, and our team here would love to answer any questions that listeners may have about that.
Yeah, and you can also go to afafoundation.net and you can learn more. You can go to those tabs, how to give, what to give, learn about wills, donor stories, even news, and how to maximize your philanthropic goals. Because especially, I know that so many conservatives and Christians have given a lot to campaigns. They've given to ballot initiatives. I'm so grateful for everyone who helped and participated to defeat the extreme abortion amendment here in the state of Florida, and we have a lot of work to do to hopefully unwind some of those amendments that did unfortunately pass in states around the country. But now that kind of election season is over, you may be looking at how can I participate in long-term ministry goals, and AFA Foundation is a great way to do that. So you can go to afafoundation.net. And speaking of those stories, I know, Chelsea, you get to speak to a lot of our donors, and what are some of the stories, or maybe one or two in particular, that you find most meaningful to share?
Absolutely. Well, we do get to speak to donors from across the country, and really just listening to how AFA or AFR has impacted their we did just get off of election season, so, impacted their voting in different ways, impacted families, and really broken some generational curses that, have been in their family for years. So just getting to hear how the truth of God and God's Word impacts families across the nation through AFA and AFR are really some of my favorites. And we have letters and stories every day that we hear. So it's very, very encouraging, God's work that He's doing in lives.
Wow, that is really incredible. And, this is one of the amazing things about AFA as a whole. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be part of this ministry is that it is very long term, because as I said prior to the election, regardless of what was going to happen on November 5th, which, God knew before the foundation of the world, the outcome, we didn't know. We were all trying to predict it, but we didn't know. But regardless of what happened, AFA would continue our mandate, which is to teach the truth of the gospel of Christ and to participate in church ministry, family ministry, ministering to families, the truth of the Word of God, and also being good citizens and participating in civil government. And that work happens and will continue to happen, regardless of who is in leadership in government, regardless of the direction of America. And we're so grateful for the blessings of liberty that we can continue to do that. That's why your gift is very important to us. I'm so grateful to be part of this ministry and to get up every morning and be able to speak the truth of the Lord and to talk about the top trending headlines, what's going on in the world of politics and government and civil government from a biblical worldview perspective. And you're not going to hear that from the mainstream media, even the conservative channels. You don't hear the biblical worldview perspective. So what we do and the work that we get to do here in the ministry that we're involved in is always just so impactful and exciting. And Chelsea, I hear from listeners all the time that they just love the American Family Radio Network. They're so excited to wake up every morning, and turn on the radio and hear encouragement, all the way through the evening. So it is a really great way that we can continue to invest in the next generation, because I know for a lot of donors as well, they're very concerned perhaps about the next generation, and so this is a way that they can plan even after they've gone home to be with the Lord. They can plan to be a part of the next generation, teaching the truth of the gospel of Christ.
Absolutely. Yes, those seeds that we sow now really will impact generations to come. Absolutely. We would love to speak with anyone who's interested. Our phone number at the foundation is 1-800-326-4543. Extension 345. And as far as deadlines for the end of year giving, I know that everybody kind of tries to get those requests into the different, financial institutions and companies. And so the sooner that you start those, start to think about those things, the better. We really, we ask that anyone who is interested in a charitable gift annuity, give us a call. Within December, we definitely can send paperwork and get figures to you very quickly, but institutions that you may pull funds from, might have some sooner deadlines. So the sooner that you start thinking about those end-of-year gifts and planning for those, the better.
Yeah, that is such a great point. I mean, we're already midway through November, which is really incredible. And so the sooner you start planning, then you can get that done, especially, before the Christmas season, so that you can get that done and then, go plan what you're going to fill your Operation Christmas Child shoebox with. So, you can get this done. And so you can call that phone number, and you can also go to afafoundation.net and learn more. So, Chelsea, I so appreciate you dropping by, and what are kind of the end-of-year goals for the foundation?
Well, really just to help as many folks put a charitable gift annuity in place and into their portfolio as possible. We really like to recommend that around 10% of someone's overall portfolio be in a charitable gift annuity. That's a really great kind of starting point. So if anyone has a question about that, that's a great starting point, and they can kind of go from there. But again, it will give them lifetime income as well as support the work of AFA and AFR for generations to come. Jenna, thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chelsea Wildman. Really appreciate it so much. And again, you can go to afafoundation.net. And thank you so much to all of our listeners who are donors, who give in many different ways to this ministry, and also who pray for this ministry, who pray for everyone who's here, our hosts, our staff, our leadership, our board, everybody here, because we want to continue in the things of the Lord to teach the truth of the gospel of Christ. And this ministry has just been such a great blessing in my life. And I love it here, and I'm so grateful for all of you that I get to hear from every day who find it a blessing in your lives as well. So thanks so much. You can always reach me and my team at Jenna at afr.net, and I'll see you Monday. But don't forget the podcast, too.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family